Good morning, guys. It is Monday, the 6th of July, and we are on episode 54 of Small Business Connections. Actually, I'm going to do something different. We're looking to change the name of it, and we're looking at a couple of different things. We're looking at mindfulness for entrepreneurs, or we're looking at the self-aware entrepreneur. One of the other ones is the Entrepreneur Lifeline. So if you have suggestions for how we should change this podcast, what we should change the name to, we'd really appreciate that. I want to tell you what this podcast is about. The idea of it is that we are a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. I'm so sorry. You jinxed me, Crista. The idea is to give you lessons that we've learned, things we've learned in our business that can help you in your business. So we want you to ask questions. If you have questions, please do ask it. We're going live today on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It'll be up on LinkedIn later. We're going to pull the audio after that and put it on the podcast. So if you're listening to this by podcast, it's gone through a lot of levels before it got to you. So hopefully you're enjoying it. If you are, we ask that you subscribe. Speaking of subscribing, we need subscribers over at YouTube. Please go over there. It's youtube.com/BrennanAnnie. All of the podcasts can be found there. And every time it comes up, you'll get a little notification if you subscribe. But mostly you'll be helping me. I'm going to always be honest with you here. I need 1,000 subscribers before we can monetize that channel. So if you can subscribe, you'll be helping a fellow entrepreneur, and we would appreciate that. We are giving back in a small way with ASMMcampus.com. You can go over there and learn how to do social media yourself if you're not ready to have an agency. So it'll give you some ideas of what you need to know for your business. We've got a really great 19-lesson video series over there that is full of information. It will help you really get started in digital marketing, and whether it may tell you that you need to do it yourself, or you may look at it and go, oh, that's a lot of work, and hire somebody. But either way, there's a lot of information there for you. So I want to introduce you to our guest today. We have Crista Grasso. She's going to talk about the lean out method. Hi, Crista. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great today. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I am loving having all these people who I had not met, because we started this with people I knew. We started it with all local entrepreneurs. So it's nice to have new people on here. So tell us a little bit about the lean out method.
Yeah, absolutely. So the lean out method is something that I developed over the past 20 years, and it's really a way for businesses to learn how to achieve more by doing less. And so it's about getting really crystal clear on the things that are adding the most value for your customers, the most profit for your business, and really getting focused and eliminating everything else, i.e. leaning out.
That's great. Well, and that's so many people think, you hear hustle, 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 and they think they have to work. And you do have to work hard. You're never going to not be able to work hard. You've got to work hard, but working smart and getting it done in an easier way is definitely key. So explain to me what the lean out method is. What does it mean to lean out?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an actual method that walks you through what I call lean strategic planning. So it takes you from setting that vision and getting really super clear on what's important to you, why it's important, and where you see yourself, your business, and your customers in the future. And then systematically breaking that down into your goals, both longer term and then near term for the next 90 days, breaking that down into what it's actually going to take to achieve those goals, and making sure that you're working in a really productive and lean way throughout the days, so that those activities that you do that are goal aligned get you there really quickly, and in a way that drives a lot of profit to the business and value to the customers. Really leaning out is all about profit for the business, value for your customers, and eliminating everything else.
So, it occurs to me that this reminds me a lot of Michael Hyatt. He talks a lot about living your best life by not just trying to focus on your business, but on your life as a whole. So what happens when we don't lean out? So why is it so critical?
Yeah, I think the thing is, if you think about as a new business owner, if you can remember back, depending on where you are in your own entrepreneurial journey, to that first starting out, when you're in that stage of trying to find the product market fit and figure out what's working, what do you naturally do? You work really, really hard. You say yes to absolutely everything. Hustle is just pretty much what you do. And
Right.
during that stage, you tend to sacrifice a lot of other things for the business. Less time with family and friends, less time doing fun things, sometimes less time sleeping and self care and things that are really important. And the reality is that's not sustainable. And in business, you do want that sustainable success. And I know there's a lot of polarizing opinions on balance. I do truly believe that balance is possible, but I think it's possible at more of a macro scale than a micro scale, in that you have to know what's really important to you and you have to create protected time for things other than your business as well. But if you're just in that hustle mentality, you're not really working smarter and you're just focused on working harder, like you said before, it becomes really hard to achieve that balance and make that happen. So it is so important that you have to look more broadly and more holistically at your whole life and the lifestyle that you want, and then fit your business into that. And there's always periods where you're going to be working much more in your business. Early on, for sure, when you're about to launch something, for sure, as you go through big changes. But with the proper planning and just that real commitment to make sure that you're carving out the space for the things that matter, you can absolutely do it.
Right. Well, and it occurs to me when we had a child who had he's doing great now. Let me start there. But we had a child who had really bad depression, and when this
Mhm.
happened, I took so much care of him that I fell apart. I fell completely
Mm.
apart, and it was a horrible thing to happen. I would never go back and have it happen again. But it was a lesson that was learned that I apply to everything. And so, as a business owner, you've got that same responsibility. You
Mhm.
cannot, as a mom, not taking care of myself meant that I could not take care of my child in the end. And that's horrible. And as a business owner, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't carve out, actually, I'm one to preach. Anastasia literally last week went into my calendar and blocked out lunch. And then she also went into my calendar and blocked out 15-minute increments in between meetings, because she said, you do sometimes have to go to the bathroom.
Important
Right?
things.
It's important. You've got to eat, and sometimes you've got to go to the bathroom. And so let's put these into your calendar. But she's right. If I'm not taking that time to take care of myself, if I'm getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to work out and I'm working until 7 o'clock at night, what am I doing to my body? So it is, I love that you're doing this. I think it's a great way of thinking.
Yeah, it's so important because in the beginning, we're so eager and so excited that we feel like we can work that way forever. But eventually it catches up to you, right? Either it catches up sometimes in a really bad way, but sometimes it's a subtle way, and you're just simply not very effective. You're not very efficient. It takes you a lot longer, and the work that you're producing isn't of the quality that you expect of yourself or of your business. And one way or another, it takes a toll. And hopefully it's
Exactly.
not something really significant, but it does take a toll. You've got to focus on really just figuring out what matters most, and then create time and space for the things outside your business that matter also.
Right. Otherwise, you're going to lose passion for it in this business that you started, that you
Mhm.
fell in love with. You're not going to be able to keep. So I think that's such a great point. All right. So let's talk about, I am so lucky. I have the best staff. I really do. I say it all the time, but they are so passionate about what we do. So how I got lucky. And I am firmly, and when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh no, you should take credit." I'm like, "No, literally, I walked into Starbucks and found my first employee, and she is just the best thing that ever happened." And all of them have been that way. That they've fallen into my lap. But how do you do it if you're not lucky?
Yeah, I truly believe you can systematize anything. But there are probably some things that you did very strategically, maybe without even realizing it, that brought really good, solid people to you. And I think, one of the ways that you build that sustainable success, you get off that hustle hamster wheel, is you doing what you do best and hiring a team or surrounding yourself with people who do what they do best, that ultimately creates a great ecosystem for success, right? And so
Right.
you want to bring in those people who complement you very well. And, you can play to your strengths, they can play to theirs, but you also want them to be really super passionate about what you're doing and to have equal buy-in to your vision and mission as you do. And I think that's the key. And it really comes into hiring the right people. And I've hired and interviewed people for more than 20 years now. I've done this a lot through a lot of companies that I've consulted and worked for, as well as in my own business. And one of the mistakes I see a lot of people make is they go for the resume and they look for the checklist of all of the different skills that somebody has for the position they're hiring. And they sometimes ignore the most important piece, which is actually the fit. And I think when you want somebody who's really going to be part of a high performing team and who's really going to share that passion, you've got to start with fit. Skills can be learned, skills can be trained, right? And people can up level their skills over time. Certainly, if you're bringing in somebody who's specialized, you definitely need that knowledge, but go for fit first. And so know as a leader, what is my leadership style and what do I look for in employees and how are they going to work really well for me where we make a good team? If you have a team and you're bringing somebody in, what is that team dynamic and what type of person do you want on that team to support and further enhance that team dynamic? And so it really comes down to getting clear on what your vision, your mission, your values are as a company and finding a person who fits that and then investing in that person to develop them, so that they can continue to kind of bring your brand mission, your company mission forward, but also so they can upskill themselves and keep contributing to the business.
That is so great. Yeah, I think, I've actually written down 3 points here that I think I want to break that down into. And the first is, I said maybe we'll call this the self-aware entrepreneur. But the truth is, if you're not self-aware, how can you get your team on board with what you do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what, and as an entrepreneur, as a small business, as bigger businesses, I know you've got to figure out what your team mission is, right? You got to really figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
As a small business, I think it all comes down to your core values. What are your core values? And because they're going to run through your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your core values and how are you going to help people on your team see what those are, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so I think that was the first kind of question. But then the second one is, do you believe in testing? Do you think that part of that is not just gut feel, but do you actually test to see where people are on the Enneagram or any of those other tests before you do that?
There's so many really, really interesting tests. The color code is one of my absolute favorites. I also really like DISC, and I do look at those things because I think that's so important. I've not done as much, I'm going to mispronounce it, the Enneagram.
Yes.
You said it
Yeah.
right. I have not done as much with that one, but I am just starting to learn a little bit more about that. I don't know how I've never used that throughout my career, but I do tend to use the other ones. I also, I used to use StrengthsFinder for a long time. But I do find it just to be really interesting to see how people naturally react to situations. It's not just what they know, but it's more how they handle things. And that again gets at that fit. And are they going to both complement your leadership style, but also the team either that you already have or the team that you envision having if you're just starting to build up your team? So I do think that some of those things are really important. And I do a mix of, I'd say, qualitative and quantitative, right? I do want to know what skills they have. I want to know more about their personality type using one of those tools. But I also do go a lot by gut feel. And it's more, are there any red flags? Do I have that nagging suspicion that something just doesn't feel right? They've said all the right things, they've smiled all the right times, but there's something that just doesn't feel right. I found when I ignore that, that comes back to bite me. And
Yeah.
sometimes on the other end, I've done the leap of faith where I've said, they really don't have all the skills that I'm looking for. And I know this, and I know I could find somebody who can hit the ground running, but I just feel like this person is the right person. And I've brought those people in and I've invested in them. And they have been some of my absolute best people.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. I want to go one of the things you said is trusting your gut. And a couple of years ago, I hired a wonderful lady here. Her name's Karen Mitchell, and she came in as a coach for me. And I think it was one of our very first meetings. And I told her 2 stories of what had happened recently. And in both of them, I ended the sentence with, I knew I shouldn't have gone.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, how often do you not trust your gut? And I started thinking about it and I realized, I often don't trust my gut, and especially if it's because I want people to like me. And
Mhm.
so I'll go and do something that I knew I shouldn't have done, and then go, why did I do that? I knew I was not in the proper frame of mind to be there, right? So that gut thing is so important. If you and it's one of those things that if you could learn to trust that, I think you're going to learn a lot more about who you are, and you're going to do a lot better in your business. So I think that was a really important lesson.
Yeah, I think that we naturally feel the need to justify something. So our gut will tell us one thing, and then we come up with all the reasons why our gut was wrong. and
Right.
um,
Yeah.
but you just need to learn to trust your gut and stop second guessing it. It's fine to do validation, right? Sometimes you do need that actual analysis, and you want data to back things up, especially the more important a decision is. But more often than not, you're right. I mean, I would say 99.9% of the time you're right, and then you talk yourself out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, yeah. So I want to go back to one more thing. As you were talking about finding a high performing team or creating a high performing team. I'm reading, everybody knows it. Anybody who's been listening to this knows I'm reading the Walt Disney biography right now. And he talked about that. He talked about how in the beginning he hired animators who had a lot of experience. And then he realized they just wouldn't do it the way he wanted them to do it. And
Mhm.
so he started hiring inexperienced animators because he could bring them in and he could teach them. And I think that is something that's worth thinking about. You know, if you bring somebody in who is set in their ways because this is how they've always done it, then it's harder to get them to learn. So building a team isn't easy. There's a lot of factors.
Mhm. Very true. I did that when I was earlier on in my career. I was a project manager, and I went on to manage big global PMOs. And I started off trying to hire the most experienced project managers, and they came in and they weren't successful because there was a certain recipe we had come up with to be successful working in the companies that we were consulting with. And so I later learned to bring in less experienced people and develop and mentor them into working in a certain way because I knew what those success patterns were. So I think that is so important. That's such a great point that you made.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to give you my secret. My secret, it was so funny because I just interviewed somebody and she says, I can't find a job. And I said, well, why not? And she says, because I haven't worked for 17 years. And I was like, okay, so what have you done? And she says, well, I was a mom. And I'm like, how many kids? She told me. And I'm like, and tell me about your volunteer things. And she did. And I'm like, the people who aren't hiring you are idiots. You know, because
True
you've been a
statement.
mom for 17 years. Do you know how hard that job is? You have worked for
Seriously.
17 years, and we've had such luck. Almost everybody who's worked here is a mom. The only exception
Mhm.
is my son Ethan, and he's the mom of his friend group, so he counts.
Yeah, you master the art of multitasking, handling difficult situations. I mean, you've got it all down.
Oh, wow, and they're so willing to work, and they're so excited
Mhm.
to be back, and it's really a neat opportunity when you hire a woman who's been home, and I haven't had any stay-at-home dads, but I'm sure the same would hold true for a stay-at-home dad. But I've hired stay-at-home moms. That's how I have done it, and it's been a really powerful thing to watch these women come back in. My only fear is that they're so incredible that somebody's going to steal them away. I actually threaten everybody who meets them. I say, "Let me introduce you to Anastasia, and if you hire her, I'm going to end you."
I love it.
So, all right. So you've done a lot and you've worked with multi-million dollar companies. So tell me some of the scaling lessons you've had. What are some of the things you've learned about scaling a business?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've consulted and worked in big, huge Fortune 50 companies for most of my career. And it's really interesting. There's a few things that they do pretty consistently. Even in the nonprofit businesses or smaller businesses I've worked with, the ones who are really successful definitely have certain patterns of success. And one of them is they create a lot of space to work on their business instead of just in their business. They create room for innovation. They create room for improvement, and they're very, very customer centric. So, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, I would say the things that you can learn from what the big businesses do is make sure that you're creating that space and that you're carving out time to always be thinking about what's next in your business. Not only doing what you do incredibly well, but also thinking about what's coming and what might your future customers be looking for or want or find value in, even if it's not things that they're asking you for, right? That's true innovation is you're kind of thinking ahead of your customers and their needs. And all of the big businesses, when they scale, and especially when you see them really skyrocket past their competitors and release really interesting, innovative things in the market, it's because these, as customer centric as they are, they're also thinking ahead of their customers, being very visionary and starting to think about what's next, what's coming, what can we introduce, and where can we create a need in the market that either doesn't exist today or that we know our customers are going to have in the future. So that's one thing. And then the other is just from a customer centricity perspective, a lot of the decisions that they make, a lot of the things that they do, they're very focused on their customer and getting really fast feedback from their customer. One of the things I do with these companies is I help them adopt lean and agile ways of working. And the purpose of doing that is getting that really fast customer feedback. So they don't sit behind the scenes and create something and try to perfect it all by themselves, then put it out in the market and wonder why it didn't land. They're getting customer feedback and doing these really quick iterations and cycles to try to get that feedback and making pivots and shifting and adapting as they go along. And I think that's something that small business owners really need to think about as well, is how can I be getting feedback from my customer on the thing that I'm doing, the offer that I'm putting out, so it's really landing and hitting their needs and meeting their needs, instead of behind the scenes trying to build something perfect that I know they need, but they may not know they need because you didn't get their feedback or it's not in their language.
That is, yeah. So I'm sitting over here taking notes, furiously. So I have a couple of things I want to say. First of all, how would you suggest they get the feedback?
Yeah, it really depends on what you're doing, but it could be there's a such thing as a minimum viable product, right? Your MVP. And so let's say that you're about to launch some big, huge program. Maybe it's a year long. I'll go with something that I have in my business, right? So I have a year long mentorship program that has a huge back end training component to it. Well, instead of pre developing all of it and then announcing it and doing a big reveal, it would be getting a small group of beta customers, maybe to come in at like founding prices, and knowing that part of their involvement is that they are giving you that feedback and targeting your real ideal customers to be members and personally inviting them, and getting that feedback as you go along. It could be taking different ideas and floating them out. Like, and you mentioned earlier, I'm thinking of the name of this. What do you think, right? You're getting
Right.
customer feedback, you're floating that out to people. And so it could be something as formal as getting a small beta group together. It could be something more informal where you're just polling and putting things out there and trying to get that feedback and see what kind of response you get to your different ideas.
That's, yeah, that makes sense. And you can, again, we see people send out surveys. We see there's a lot of ways, but if you hide your head in the sand and you don't want to get the information and you're scared, you probably already know there's a problem, right?
Hmm.
So it is
Yeah.
good to just go ahead and take that leap and ask those questions and find out what you've got going on. So I also want to go back to what you were saying about being ahead of your customer. And if you think
Hmm.
about it, I came up with 3 examples, and I'm sure you've got more. I was thinking of Steve Jobs. The
Hmm.
BlackBerry was great, right? It was a great little device. Everybody was loving it. So why take it to that next level? Right. And it's the only phone anybody wants. I mean, yeah, there's that other Android thing that, whatever. but, but still, and Phil Knight over at Nike, people were happy running around in their Converse. They were
Hmm.
fine with that. But he created this whole new level of shoe. And then Walt Disney, if you think about Walt Disney, first of all, he put sound to the animation. And then when nobody was asking for it, nobody wanted it, and they were saying, we're not even going to pay for it if you do it, he added color.
Mhm.
And that totally changed everything. So you do have to think outside that box. You do have to take those risks. And I think that's one of the things that you didn't mention, but I do wonder, how much is this about being willing to take a risk?
Oh yeah, it's critical. It's absolutely critical. And you do, I mean, you have to be strategic about your risks. Sometimes you take a risk that you know is a big risk, but it's probably going to have a big payoff if it works. And it's something that to you, it's worth it. It's worth that risk to go in, or it's such a big experiment or a big bet that you're placing that you're really hoping it works, but you're not sure if it's going to. Sometimes they're smaller risks, but you do, as a business owner and entrepreneur, have to get really comfortable with taking risks and making decisions with uncertainty, right? You're not going to have a certain outcome. You're not going to know for sure if it's going to land. There's things that you can do to improve the likelihood of it by getting that constant customer feedback and doing those smaller bets and getting the feedback as you go along, and then incrementally building something. But you do have to just accept that not everything is going to work. Not everything is going to land, and you got to do it anyway.
Right.
And you just have to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a book. I can't remember it. Maybe it was something called the Startup Mindset, but they
Lean
talked
startup?
about, what was it?
Lean startup, maybe?
I don't know, but what they talked about is getting your mind in that position. Getting your
Mhm.
mind in the position that that you had when you first started, when you were like, well, I'm starting a business, right? I'm going to start this. I'm going to do something new. And that after a little while, you go, oh, wait. This, I'm comfortable. I don't want to take that risk. But as soon as
Mhm.
you stop taking the risks, you stop growing, you
Yeah,
know?
you truly, I don't believe you're ever standing still in business. You're either growing and advancing or you're regressing and falling behind. And if you're not actively trying to grow and innovate and stay ahead of things, you fall behind and don't even realize it until sometimes it's too late to recover. And that's where I think it's just so important that you create that space for innovation and just for constantly trying to think ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this may be a woo-woo statement I'm going to make here, so forgive me because I'm not really a woo-woo person. But there's the whole idea of giver's gain, right? You give something and something comes back to you. So we belong to BNI and we do a lot of referring, and good business comes back to me. But there's also taking a risk. I feel like you take these risks, and yes, sometimes you fail, but more often than not, something good comes back to you. And we just had this moment that was so crazy because it wasn't, I was 100% willing to take the risk. I built a new website, paid for the new website, put it out there. It's the ASMMcampus.com. And then what came back to me, interestingly, was a grant. If you had taken a risk in business, and we applied for this grant, we took a risk, we started this website, a whole new area of our business, and we got that money back. I was like, isn't that the craziest thing? That it was just like the universe was like, oh, good job taking that risk. Here's the money back.
Mhm.
So I think there is that bit of woo woo to the world.
I agree with you fully, honestly. It's part of, I mean, the more often you show up, the more likely you are that one of those times you're going to be in the right place at the right time, right? And it's like you can't expect things to happen if you're not putting yourself out there and going for it and taking the risks. And you have to just be comfortable with the fact that not everything is always going to be a success the first time through. And there are going to be failures, which are just learnings really as you go through, and just do it.
Yeah, no, it is funny that you have to do that. All right, so let's talk about this part, because avoiding overwork and overwhelm, it's so important. So many of us just work ourselves to death, and
Mhm.
aren't seeing the benefits. So tell me how you do that.
Yeah, and so this one actually builds off of that last question too about some of the scaling secrets. So when I'm in these really large companies, one of the things that they always know where they are going. They have their strategic objectives, they have their roadmap, they know exactly what's important. Now, they tend to overwork and overwhelm people, but that's a that's a sidebar. We can learn from the fact that they know where they're going and they have their strategic objectives and apply that to our own businesses to actually avoid the overwork and overwhelm. And so I think it really comes down to having that super clear vision so you know what's directionally correct for your business, and then setting those near-term goals. So in the next 90 days, you know what your focus is. And the reason is that a lot of times we say yes to things and have too much on our plate that really truly is unnecessary. And when you have that clear vision, it helps to answer the question, is this the right thing to do? And when you have your 90-day goal, it answers the question, is this the right thing to do right now? And so sometimes you need to say no to something because it's just simply not a good fit. And if you really look at a lot of the things that you've done in periods of overwork and overwhelm, you can probably recognize a lot of them that you're like, why did I even bother with that? That's not even where I see my business going. That's not the customer group I want to work with. I didn't get anything out of that experience. And those are usually things that tend to not align to your vision. But then sometimes we also feel the need to say yes to everything right now. And the reality is, if you know what your 90-day goal is for the next, the upcoming quarter, and it's not in alignment, you can just simply say, no, not now, and revisit that thing later. At a time where it is more in alignment with your goals. So anytime you're trying to avoid overwork and overwhelm, I think it all goes back to longer term vision and shorter term goals to see if it's the right thing right now. Then beyond that, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can work within your day to improve your productivity. But you have to know that the things you're working on are the right things first. And then from there, do things to become more productive. My favorite of which is to work in focus blocks. And that is where you take as long of a period of uninterrupted time as you can get. And you either work on one activity or you work on a batch or a group of like activities that complement one another. And you just get so much done so quickly without all the task switching and context switching and wasted time and productivity that goes with that.
That, I said the other day that I don't want to say this, but oh my God, I love that so much. So I had said to somebody, I have caught myself that every time somebody says something, I'm like, oh, I love that. And I do, but I've got to stop saying it. But this time I had to say it because I hadn't thought about the 90-day goal. It was not even on my radar to do that. So you've made me think, and Anastasia just walked in as you were talking, and I'm going to hang up with you. I'm going to go over and talk to her. What are our 90-day goals? I think that was just awesome. And this is why we do this podcast. It's why we do the podcast, because there are things like that. We're running a business and we're busy and we forget to stop and look at things like that. So I love that you did that. You talked about the focus blocks. I think those are so important, and it's so hard for a business owner to make themselves do. It's so easy to get yourself stuck in a rut, right? Where you're just working and working and working and not ever finding time to just focus on one thing. So how do you manage that for yourself?
Yeah. So there's two tips I can give. One is I want to share a quote with you, which is my favorite lean quote, and it's stop starting, start finishing. And so as as entrepreneurs, the creativeness in us, I think, has us love to start things, and we don't always want to see things through to completion. And so if you end a week and you're exhausted and you worked so hard but don't have a lot to show for it, that's usually a good indicator that you started a lot and didn't finish a lot, right? And so you want to stop starting, start finishing. So you want to get things done start to finish before you start something new. And the focus block is a way to do that. And so how I do it in my own business is I know my days, right? Sunday is a work day to me. I don't take Sunday off. I take a different day during the week off. So I tend to do a big focus block on Sundays on content. I find that for whatever reason, I tend to be in more of a creative state when it comes to writing on Sundays. So Sunday is my content focus block. My husband knows, do not interrupt me when I'm in my Sunday focus block.
Right.
And so I think you have to create your conditions for focus. I've got my water, I've got my sticky notes, I've got my markers, I've got everything up on my computer, I've got my email closed, I've got my notifications on my phone turned off. And so I create the conditions to sit and focus, and I carve out, it's usually about 3 to 4 hours, and I do all of my content for the week during that time. And I also tend to do my content in themes. So I'll have one thing that I repeatedly talk about throughout a week. So it makes it super easy to do my blog posts, my newsletter, my social media posts, record a video, doing whatever pieces of content I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of different things, but it's all related to that same topic. And if I had tried to piecemeal that or scatter that throughout the week, I probably wouldn't finish it. It wouldn't be as high quality, or it just simply would take me 3 times as long. So having that dedicated focus block not only gets it done quicker, but it ensures that I actually finish what I started.
That is really brilliant. I love it. Thank you. So, have you written a book?
I have not. I've written a planner. I have a 90-day planner, which is good,
Okay.
the base of a book that will be coming in 2022.
Oh, good, good. So, how do we get your planner?
You can actually find that as well as everything else on my website. So it's leanoutmethod.com. But yeah, it's a 90-day planner, and it actually walks you through that lean strategic planning that I mentioned, where you start with your vision, you break it down into your goals, and then you really make sure that the things you do on a daily and weekly basis tie back to and are in support of that vision and goals.
Okay, that's a great idea, and I'm just like I said, my mind was blown about the 90 days. I'm gonna definitely stop and do that. So, all right, well, I want to make sure people know they can find you at leanoutmethod.com. Where else can they find you?
Yeah, the most interactive and best place to reach me, honestly, is Facebook. So if you search for Lean Out Circle on Facebook, it's a private group. I actually go live in the group every single week on Thursdays, and I do a little mini training. I answer all your questions live. We're pretty active. You can also find me on Instagram at Crista Grasso.
Okay, so Instagram at Crista Grasso. Hold on one second. We just had a comment pop up. That's why I got a little distracted for a minute. This is great advice. I just need to get my clients in that mindset. Much of what I do not have finished is because I am waiting on information. That is
Yeah.
so. Yes, we have that in our. Do you use a CRM or a project manager?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the tool called Monday. I know a lot of people love Trello and Asana, and those are both great. I personally love Monday, and that's what I use for absolutely everything. Monday is where I do most of my management, and then I'm a big process person. So all my systems and process flows are in a tool called Miro. So between Miro and Monday, I don't know how I would run my business without either of those.
Okay, so how is it? Miro? Mirro?
Miro, and that's
Okay.
more for it's basically a virtual whiteboard. So if you do a lot of brainstorming with team members, it works great. If you do a lot of process flowing, it works great for that. And then for actual management of our tasks, our activities, our CRM, everything else I do in Monday.
Okay, so I'm going to put that in the show notes. If you've missed it, if you're wondering what it is, I'm going to do one other thing. And I'm so sorry, Krista, I didn't put this in the banners to ask you, what is your favorite business book?
Oh, I love The Big Leap, which isn't entirely business book related, but I think because it helps you focus on your zone of genius, and that's ultimately what we typically build our businesses around, or a core piece of what we do in business, I would say that. And then if I give a second one that's more business related, it would be The One Thing, which is really
Uh,
just about getting super focused. And again, it's basically leaning out in a book. It's a great
that's
book.
John Stoy just told us about that one last week. That was his
Hmm.
that was his recommendation as well. But nobody's recommended the Big Leap. We'll put
Oh,
them
it's
both
great.
up on the in the show notes as well. That usually is on YouTube, by the way, and then it goes onto our blog, or our blog on our website. So you can find that at ASMM Digital. Krista, this was really fun. And like I said, I have a whole page of notes. It's actually incredible how many notes I've taken over here. So you did a great job. I really appreciate
Thank you. This has been so fun. Thank you so
it.
much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So Wednesday we have Michelle. She's going to talk about something a lot of people, I just asked you whether you'd written a book, but she's going to talk about writing as an entrepreneur and why you should do it and how you should get it published and what you do with it, with all that content you create. So we're really excited about having her on because so many of us are already thinking about writing. How many people have you heard say, how often have you said, I really need to write a book, right? You've got to write a book. So I love that she's coming on. I want to remind you to subscribe. If you're listening to this as a podcast, please subscribe wherever you are. We'd really appreciate that. And again, we would really like you to subscribe over at youtube.com youtube.com/Brennan Annie, because we need 1,000 subscribers over there. That would help us. And if you've been listening to this, and actually, I have to tell you, I'm really impressed with what you've done, Crista, with all the content you're creating and how organized you are about it, because it does take a lot of work. If you want to do that, if somebody out in the world wants to do that and you just don't know how to go about it and you need some help, we can help you with it. We love to do it. ASMMdigital.com. Call us, message us, however you want to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. And Crista, this was absolutely wonderful. I have had a great time talking to you. So thank you so much.
Same. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'll see you Wednesday. Bye-bye.